But as I say, I wouldn't have even noticed Kenneth's little disability at the time. Did it? It never affected him though. It never affected him in schooling. He was going to college the same as the other two boys. They were at the same. They were in the same year in college. They were doing.
Oh yeah, cognitively he was very, very bright, and sometimes, Mary, I think too bright. You know, there can be a fine line where you overthink everything, and you. So yeah, when he took his own life, our whole world just fell apart. He had completed first year in college. He was doing great. We just never saw it, Mary. Never, ever, ever. And life was good. We had moved back to Ireland. He was the one that loved being back in Ireland. Truth be told, Ken and myself found it a bit difficult to readjust. We were used to, you know, the good weather and whatever else and the good life. And when we came back, it was. And
you had there were no signs. There were no.
Not, going back on it now, we look back and we think, you know, little things he might have said, but honestly and truly, no. He had got first class honours in his first year. He was doing science. The other two lads were doing engineering. He had got his exams. He was frustrated in the summer, not getting work. And they were volunteering with the Galway Arts Festival, and he loved it. And so then when it went into the week afterwards, the Galway Race Week here was always busy. And he was the one that got work for a week in a pub. And he was ecstatic that he got it. And he came home and he said, and do you know what? He said, I was able to get one other position in it. Conor, would you like to take it? He gave the option to Conor ahead of Shane. And that week, he was working. And I often think, was that a very bad thing as well? Because it was very late and it's a rough crowd oftentimes you'd have in the pub, but he was delighted to be doing it. But I think he needed a lot of sleep. You know, things took him a lot longer physically to do. But he was hugely into exercise, very determined, just gave everything. One of the teachers in the school had always said that he should go into the Special Olympics for weightlifting. He was really into weightlifting and just exercise in general. But very, very hard on himself. I often had the conversation with him. Kenneth, would you chill? Would you chill a bit? You know, life is tough enough. Don't make it any more difficult for yourself. So now we look back on little things like that and we say, was he unhappy in his head? But you couldn't. I mean, you just, without getting inside somebody's head, we could never have preempted. That week of Galway Race Week, there was actually a dance workshop going on out with Angela, Derek and Anne-Marie, and I was out there for the week. I was back working here then. I'd gone back to work after the boys finished secondary school. And we'd been back here, 6 years at the time. And the Saturday, the kids had their grade exams. So there was a party in Derek's house to celebrate the grade exams with the kids. And I came back in, of course, we were late then coming home that evening. And I came in and the boys, Conor and Kenneth, Shane had been with me. And Conor and Kenneth had gone out to work. And I said to Shane, Kenneth dropped them in, so there was no car. And I said, oh, bummer, I missed the two lads before they went to work, which was 10 o'clock or something. You know, it was the long summer's evenings. So they'd work very late. They'd work at maybe 9 o'clock, but they'd work from 9 and maybe not finish until 4. And every day that week, we used to get up at maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock and check because it's very difficult to get taxis during race week. And so on the Friday night when Ken we take every other night, Ken would get up one night, I'd get up the next night. And on the Friday night when Ken came back up to bed, he said, Kenneth said to me, Dad, he'd phoned Kenneth one night or Conor another night. Dad, we're grand. They're giving us a free pint after working so hard. And we're old enough now, we can make our own way home. You know, we were babying them too much, he was letting us know. So so they got a taxi on the Friday night, and then on that Saturday night, we consciously made the decision that we wouldn't get up to
check on them.
baby them or check on them or see if they wanted the lift home. So they got a taxi home. They shared it with 2 other people, and they got off. We're just up from the prom, so they got off at the prom and walked up the road. And he said to Connor that night, do you ever wonder where life's going, or something to do to the effect of, that you don't figure out life. And I know Connor expressed remorse afterwards that he kind of dismissed him. But I said to Connor, if he said to me, I'd say, look at me, I still haven't figured out life. You're never going to figure it out. It was, and he would have had deep conversations. He was quite deep and philosophical with stuff. Even though it was science he was studying, we often thought he was quite philosophical with things. So poor Shane found him then the next morning. It was, and people say, oh, it's to borrow the moment and something gets into their head, but I don't know. I don't know, was something he had thought through. It was too well orchestrated. And our world fell apart, Mary, and it'll never be the same again. Never.
I don't know what to say.
There's nothing anybody can say, and it will always be there. It's a huge part of us. And we've all had such blessed lives before that. And thankfully, the 4 of us have had such blessed lives since that. But it'll be a huge part. And I just wish, I remember saying to so many of the friends we had during the funeral, I mean, friends just rally around you, and people came in and set up like a tent out the back for the kids to gather, the college kids at the time, and the very close-knit community, the school had gone to the Bish. They were all gathered outside, and I went out to talk to them, and I said to them, if you would just talk to somebody, we can't help, we can't fix anything if you don't. And it's the one thing I would always say to kids in the dancing, if anything is bothering you. It's made me so much more aware that so often our attitude will be with somebody, suck it up, because that's the way we were reared, if they're moaning and groaning. And I always say, sometimes maybe people aren't able to suck it up, and we don't, to get our heads inside that, especially if we're strong-willed ourselves and from a problem solving.
But you had no way. There's no possible way that you could have preempted anything like this. I mean, from Connor, from what he simply saying, have you ever thought how life is played out? I mean, we all ask that question, and people do say it is a spur of the moment thing. But yeah, I really don't know what to say. I mean, it was such a shock. It was such a shock to everybody that knew Kenneth and knew you and knew the boys since they were children.
Yes.
Since the very first day that I saw them dancing, and it was just, I actually thought it was like there has to be some mistake when I heard it.
Yeah, a lot of people actually. And then they were wondering when they heard Kenneth, because of course he had Ken's name, they were thinking God was a Ken when they heard it. But and
how does COVID lockdown, is it helping or is it exacerbating the situation? I mean, you have more time you're closer as a family, but there's more probably time to be contemplative about it, to think. Well, is that helping?
We're 6 years since Kenneth died, and
it's hard to believe.
It is hard to believe that, and definitely time helps. Jesus Mary, the first few months I could not open my front door and go out to the gate. You're just overcome with fear. That's the only way I can describe it. And, you know, I'd always say to kids dancing as well, I definitely think the dance training helps. It's sort of shoulders back, head up, and plow through, you know, that you definitely get some kind of tenacity from years of competition or whatever. And it definitely helped
Well,
me.
you're prepared for taking criticism. You're prepared for taking loss.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I
uh,
remember when I finally got out to walking the prom, somebody said to me once, and what are you afraid of? And it's like, you can't describe what you're afraid of. I couldn't
you
describe.
know,
I had clothes. I had two lots of clothes. One went in the wash for several weeks afterwards. You wore one, you swapped them out, but you just plow through because you have to. So somebody said to me, "What are you afraid of?" And it's like, I don't know, but your whole world has fallen from under you. So this fear engulfs you. And I remember walking the prom when I finally got out there, and I'd go down on the beach away from everybody and thinking, all these people, like, can they not see I'm different? Can they? People are walking by and of course they don't see, or, you know, and I often think now when I see people, we have no idea what anyone is going through or inside anyone's head, because I would be walking down there and I didn't know my right hand from my left hand or what was going on. You just got up, you ate just about, if you did, or, you know,
you just functioned.
yeah, and even then, I don't think I functioned very well. You know, so COVID hasn't been. I became quite reclusive for a while. Then I got into decorating the house and things like that, and just got inside my own head, and just music on all the time.
Music did it for me as well when
Yeah.
you're grieving.
Yeah,
Music.
incredible. My friends, the group of friends I had were incredible. We stuck together very much as a family. We're very close, but we had always been very close. And then it was, I got more involved in the dancing. I went out to Inishmore. And for me, that was great escapism. And for me, I wanted to do the dancing, go out and go somewhere where you feel you're, you know, enhancing the culture. You're
Making a difference.
yeah, exactly.
You're thinking about others rather than for a while.
Yeah.
Trying to not think, but it's always there. Did it make you more protective over the likes of Connor and Shane? Were you
Not as far as they could see, but inside my head, I was a crazy woman whenever they went anywhere. But I couldn't put reins on them. In fact, quite the contrary. Connor went off to America, I think it was the following summer, and I was all gung ho for him going. And afterwards I thought, oh my God, you know, I was too encouraging. But it was, no, do whatever. I just wanted to make sure I didn't stop their lives. Like, there was enough of life destroyed. And I think that's a great impetus for us as well. It was great motivator to get up and do things, because Ken went back to work. I didn't. I gave up
must
work.
have been very hard for Ken as well, because men feel they automatically slot into this protector mode, and they're not as good at articulating.
Yeah.
And I don't want to generalize some men.
No, you're absolutely right.
But I think they're not as good at articulating grief. Or I know I watched my own dad when we got the phone call to say that his mother, my grandmother, had died in England, and he went up to the bedroom to cry because he didn't want us to see him crying. And it's something I do, is to go away and cry. My mother would have been different, you know, the whole place would have known that she was upset.
Well, we did a lot of crying separately as well, because I didn't want to upset the boys. I didn't want to upset Ken. He didn't. So that took time and a lot of counselling as well, which I highly recommend to anybody.
Would you?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh my gosh. That weekly hour I used to go for, I was 2 years going for an hour a week. Yeah, absolutely. That my friends, the dancing, getting back to the dancing.
And what advice would you have for people going through similar situations now, during this unprecedented times, where they mightn't have the stability of a great husband and children behind them to help them? What advice would you have advice for them?
Find what's good for them that will make them care for themselves, and especially if it's a mother, because as mothers we tend to everybody else and we're forgotten about. So find what will nurture them. If it's a bath and a nice body lotion, if it's a walk, if it's smelling flowers, if it's buying flowers, if it's talking. Usually women have female friends, and I think don't be afraid to mention it, because other people, a lot of your friends will want to mention it, but they don't want to upset you.
Well, I didn't want to mention it now today to you.
Well, I knew
that's
that.
why I said
previously, yeah.
At the start of the program, was there anything off limits with you? And you very generously said no.
No, Mary, I feel it's very important to speak about it.
It is, and because this show is associated, I suppose,
exactly,
with Samaritans and with Claire's Wish. Claire's Wish Foundation isn't a suicide awareness charity. He set it up in remembrance of his sister who had spina bifida. But the Samaritans is and the importance of talking to people, talking when you feel that you're in crisis, or talking when you feel that you have nobody. Pick up the phone.
And you know, when you invited me on the show, that was my first thing. Oh God, Mary, I don't know. And I thought, no, because of the Samaritans, I thought, no, it is.
I actually wasn't going to touch on the subject at all. I was going to keep it completely on Irish dancing.
It's part of me.
It's part of you.
It's part of me. You know, when I'm out and about and somebody says, oh, if you meet and if you're in a queue someplace and you end up talking to somebody, and do you have children? And oh, I have, they're grown up. It's a bit easier now, but and I try and evade the question a little bit. Oh, they're grown up, and oh, and how many kids do you have? Or very recently, I'm doing a course, and there was the whip around. Oh, who's, you know, and it's what birthdays. You know, if somebody says, oh, what birthday, and it's, oh, are they twins? And you're like, oh. And sometimes I couldn't, in the beginning, I'd break down crying, because it's like, I cannot deny its existence if I say they're twins. Now I'm at a stage where, okay, is this a person I'm never going to meet again? Just, you're making them uncomfortable, you're making yourself uncomfortable, try and avoid it and move on. Or what do you say? No, they're triplets, but one has passed away. And you try and pass it off nicely, then people get uncomfortable. So it's awkward, and death is awkward, and grief is awkward to talk about. And I think it's very important, and mental illness is awkward to talk about. And sometimes it's the person that you think is fine. If anybody had said, and the teachers in the school said that to us, the principal of the school said, if anybody was to ask me to pick the family least likely where this would occur in our entire school, I would probably have ye in the mix. And if anybody was to pick your three boys and say which one, I would have Kenneth in the mix of the one that would never, that he was a strong personality. So you really do not know. And I remember when he said that to me, I thought, yeah, we thought Kenneth was the tough nut of the three boys.
It was probably a front.
A front, yeah. And our house is split level here. The stairs are quite wide. It's only 8 steps up to the bedrooms. And I remember so many times, and I still think about it, how could I have known my boys so intimately as I thought, so well? And I often passed him on the stairs when he was coming down, and hey, ma'am, and I'd be going up, and you'd hear, hey, ma'am, hey, Kenneth. Are you getting your homework done? Whatever. How could I have passed him and his head a mess? How could I not have known that? How could I not have got inside? And when things were difficult, I always used to say to him, will you hang on now there, Kenneth? Because he'd escalate things often in his head. You know, he was impulsive as well. A couple of little traits that I looked at. But when he'd escalate things, I'd say, would you calm down? And the engineer would kind of kick in, you know, very, very logical. Would you calm down? Imagine it's a cake, slice it up, digestible chunks, one chunk at a time, you know, I'd be all, and I thought I was training the boys that you can solve anything, because I was always of the belief you can solve anything. It may not be the best solution, but everything, you can find a solution to things.
Yes.
And that was the one thing I always thought, well, wasn't that arrogant of me as well? Because you cannot solve death or the hurt it brings or the grief. And I couldn't solve what was ever going on in his head because, of course, I didn't know about it. So there's a lot there that.
And sometimes when people, you know, you were talking about people look awkwardly at you when you bring the subject up, or they feel awkward. I think it's an innate sense in people that they do feel like that. But really, what somebody like you is just looking for, especially when you're talking, is, and when somebody is in immediate grief in the aftermath of something, is not to just run away from them, to just listen.
Yes.
Sometimes listening is more powerful.
Yeah.
So much more powerful than actually trying to come up with wise answers.
Yes.
And wise solutions and trying to solve somebody's problem, because I can possibly imagine what it's like to be in Christine Duignan's head right now, even talking to me.
Yeah.
But I can listen.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say, I mean, Mary, there were 3 people taken from the river here, or the sea, found in the sea in the last month. And
that's right. I heard there was 5 the other night.
Well, there are 4 missing, and I'm not sure if they found the 4th person. So it's all around us, and it's more pronounced now with COVID, I think. You asked me, what difference does it make to us? It doesn't. We're very fortunate at the age we're at. The boys have 2 permanent jobs. They're working. The only situation for us was Ken was in the States on a 3-year contract, and we were living over, we were back and forth with each other. So we packed up his apartment last October and he moved back. So he's working from home. But at our age, COVID doesn't matter. I'm able to go out and I've a lovely beach to walk every day. But I'm constantly thinking of the young people that are struggling, who can't. I mean, you know, when you're young, oh, your friends are everything. You don't want to talk to your parents. You don't want to talk, you know, your friends all the way. I'm also really cognizant of people that are have young kids and they're homeschooling and they're down in salary, and it's tough. So, you know, people say to me, oh, how are you doing? We're 6 years on. We had a fabulous Christmas this year. And that's the other thing I'd say to people: if you're in the horrible grip of grief at the moment, things improve.
That's what I think I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah.
About somebody, maybe that's the people of those 4 or those 3. How are they? Suggestions?
Well, unfortunately, I had about 1.5 years after Kenneth died. Actually, it was almost 2 years, I think. There was somebody had a similar situation in our neighborhood, and I didn't want to annoy the mother or anything. Anyway, I wrote a letter to the mother, and she was always able to see how much ahead I was in the grief journey. And while it's very different for everybody, there is a process, I suppose you'd say, or a pattern, a general pattern to it. And the first year was bad, but everybody rallies around you. The second year for me was hell, absolute hell. And I had done a big fundraiser for Kenneth's first anniversary, and we'd done it for Console. And then there was the whole issue with the finances in Console and everything. So that was rock bottom for me. When I was in year 2, people have moved on with their lives, and there's the anticipation that you've moved on with yours.
Yeah.
And then this happened as well. And I felt that was the rock bottom for me. And then things slowly, you build up. Ken and myself were talking about it a few weeks ago, and we were saying there's this hole in our hearts or in our lives, and it's always going to be there, but your life expands, and
you build a callus over
it. We do it. It's not to take from that hole that would always be present for me. I got a tattoo to remind me that I'm bringing this to the grave with me, because I used to say to the boys, don't ever get a tattoo because you can't go back, you'll bring it to the grave. But each year that progresses, you're building another life around, or the rest of your life around it. And while there's that emptiness there, there's a lot of joy. we had a fabulous Christmas this year in the midst of COVID, where the boys had their 2 girlfriends here. And I hated Christmas after Kenneth died. And I genuinely had a fun, good crack, like the old Christmases we used to have. The girls were new energy here. They're 2 lovely girls. The boys were happy.
Hard to believe that they're old enough to have girlfriends now.
I know. 25, Mary, they're 25.
I remember him when he was that size, and I was
know.
wanting to see where he was going. And I can still remember that fesh, because Chris Domican had a little podium that she had the seat up and my seat and the table.
Oh God.
And I turned to watch the competition that was next. There was another competition behind me on the floor, and the seat came off the edge, and I fell backwards. Remember that? I had a black, beautiful outfit. I still have the outfit. And I can still remember my 2 legs went up in the air, and I landed in Chris Domican's lap.
Yeah, I remember that.
Chris Domican saved my pride. I was mortified, and all I could hear was, it was Anthony Costello was running it. It was a charity fesh, and it was all I could hear was Anthony Costello, like Danny Doherty, she's getting no compensation here. That was like, it was Chris Domican saved me, and that was the fesh.
That's
with Shane and Kevin and Connor.
Yeah.
And the running little butts.
Yeah, so they're 25 now, and the girlfriends are here. Yeah. So there's what I'd say to people is there's no easy way to get through the grief journey, and people telling you you're strong and all is rubbish. You just trudge through one day, one foot in front of another, and you're
strong. It's just you put up, and having the dancing. I suppose it's that kind of like determination to keep going and cover up. And
what do you do? What are the choices? What are the choices? You know, do you collapse and your children then you're losing all your family, and your other 2 kids have had it's had such profound impact on them. So as a mother, you know, the days that I didn't want to get out of bed, it was, well, you get your ass out of bed, because those kids have to go to college, get them back to college, make sure they have a future. You didn't want everything had fallen apart, but you didn't want it to completely disintegrate. So that was, if I didn't have the boys, would have been a very different story, I'd say. And I'm sure the same for Ken. And then also we were much more open to whatever opportunity presents itself. Ken had the opportunity, you know, a few years after that, 2 years afterwards, he was headhunted for Philips in the Netherlands. And it was like, oh, I couldn't do that. And I was, well, why not? Of course you can. Oh, well, what if it didn't work out? If it doesn't work out, you come home. It's like nothing bad. I'd be more of a risk taker now, because what can happen that's going to be so bad? We've lived through hell.
Nothing is going to be as bad as what you've lived through.
Yes.
And you come out more or less the other side.
Yes.
You're always going to remember Kenneth. You're always the way he left the world is not something that you're probably going to forget very easily.
Oh, and if we could go back and change it, but you see, you can't. It's just, and that's the other thing. We think we control so much, but
and that's your engineering brain as well. You know, this highly organized structure to your life. You can see it in your house, how structured and organized it is. I'm thinking of mine. It's at home in a mess. I'm looking at your lovely home and how beautiful.
Thanks. But you know that, and yeah, that's just how the mind is. It's like routine. When the boys were little, you know, people said to me, how did you have help? How did you manage? And I said, oh, it was like industrial engineering. It was like a production line. You just structured it.
Did you feel that you were on after it happened? Did you feel that you crashed completely, or did you feel that you went into hyper organized mode? Everything had to function to try and keep your mind on track, and therefore, you know,
I think the biggest change for me was I would have been very social, and out and about and stuck in things, and for me, I became quite reclusive, and more introverted, and just and even now, so COVID doesn't really matter to me, aside from the age. But you know, getting just needing time, needing the walks on the beach, needing headspace, and not able to take on too much. Before, I'd be able to juggle so many things.
Yeah.
Now,
and you were very sociable, because I can remember you at my fishes as well.
yeah, I do too, Mary. I always remember your fish.
That's very funny. I don't know where that came out of. You know, it's just there, and I just thought, where did this come out of? Give it to Christine.
Oh,
That's for another story, though.
That's another story. That's another story.
It was just, but Christine, where to from now? What's your good? Do you think we'll get back to normality soon? Do you think there's been enough done for the Irish dancing to get back?
With the dancing, the dancing will survive. Maybe it'll be better out of this. Maybe the expectation of stages and trying to have fishes perfect and scheduled and all, maybe everyone will be a bit more relaxed and just so grateful to dance. I just think if the culture of the dancing can stay alive in any form, that's really, isn't that what we all should be? The goal for everybody is
hopefully people will be
carry on. And of course the dancing will survive. Dancing is it's much bigger than just this one thing. It'll be different, I'm sure everything in life will be different. Maybe the way we run fishes will be different. Maybe online stuff will come on board more. But yeah, to me, of course, the dancing has to survive. It's so much a part of us and our culture. Maybe the cultural aspect will come back more. And everything will be more important to us. I'd like to think that.
I'd like to think that people will, put less pressure. I suppose there's a lot of pressure on, and as a fish organizer, I know it, on everything having to be on time and everything. And not every parent puts that pressure, but some do, having to be finished at a certain time. Before, when I was dancing, it could be 5 o'clock. That's ridiculous, but it could be 5 o'clock in the morning when you're getting a result.
Yeah.
And you thought nothing about it. And then suddenly, as you say, the 40-foot stage starts to come in, and the special Marley flooring on it. And while they're all important, I think the culture and the collegiality of our friendships and providing a service and providing, we're not business people at the end of the day. We're teachers and judges that run a fish and do the best you can to try and run it as professionally and as financially viable as possible.
I'd also like to think after this that we might be more cognizant of kids, everybody's mental health with the dancing. And the dancing now is 12 months a year. It just isn't to be. And I think we all need a break, and the kids need a break. And there's so much stress on them physically, psychologically, they're sports psychologists brought in now. And one of the things I don't like actually with the way things have progressed, and there's a lot I love, is you have somebody who is 2 off a recall at a Worlds, who is an amazing dancer, and they're coming home feeling they're not a good dancer. It's grand at the grade level. Everyone thinks they're brilliant, but the better they get and the higher level they get to. And that's probably my biggest peeve with the competitive dancing, is so many amazing dancers.
Especially in the Mangrod. Children who have won out of Mangrod and they're in Ordgrod, but they are never, ever going to win an Ordgrod competition against maybe a 6 times world champion. Who happens to be, they're always going to be stuck in that group, whereas there should perhaps be a major championship for them.
Yes,
it can be the best in that grade.
And not everyone is born to be a world champion. So I'm always concerned about the kids who start off and then they drop out, and especially girls, we want to keep them exercising. As they go into secondary school and college, it's fantastic for their mental health, for their physical well-being. The dancing is just, to me, beyond belief. It can be so good. But to keep them in it is so much more important. And I suppose Ceilidh dancing is great for that.
Yeah.
Where schools can do that. The grade exams are good
It
for
should
that.
be brought into schools for exercise, for mental exercise as well
Yes.
as physical exercise.
Well, another
The brain is a muscle.
Another pet peeve of mine is the fact that there's music in secondary school for the Leaving Cert, and you can sing a song for your music exam, but you can't dance a dance, you know. And I think dancing should
absolutely, because I mean, as I say, our brains are muscles, just the same as the rest of our the muscles in our body, and it needs to be exercised, and it needs to be kept fit.
Yeah.
And, well, Christine, it's been fabulous. It's been sad, and it's been
happy
talking to you today.
I'm grateful for the opportunity, Mary, and if there's just one person that it might have helped today, it was well worth it. I know in the beginning I was apprehensive, and I said to you, oh God, you know, Kenneth.
I wasn't expecting you to come back and say, Mary, I've changed my mind.
Yeah,
I'd like to come on.
I did. I said
because I had no intentions of even going there with you. I said I made the decision that if Christine brings it up, fine, but I'm not going to ask the question because
I knew that.
did not know what or even how to approach you about it. And certainly
it's part of the story, Mary. It's a big part of the story now. And
if it helps some other family,
that's the thing. Just even, or it might help a family who know another family. And, you know, no matter how awful things might seem today with COVID and been stuck at home, homeschooling kids and all, maybe if I could go back, I don't know. I don't know what I could do differently. I honestly don't know.
There's no, well, you could, but I suppose we could all do things differently if we had the benefit of hindsight. And if we could say, look, well, I didn't like the way I did that, I'll go back and do it a different way.
Yeah.
But there's nothing about, you know.
So I suppose the message I'd like to say to people in the midst of COVID is be gentle to yourself. Today, if kids are not getting through the homeschooling, if they're, whatever is falling apart, if the dinner gets burnt, whatever, if you could let go. I would have been very organized and orderly. And now when things fall apart, I have such a different attitude with, oh, so what? Everything, if it's not death, even if there's an illness, there's hope. If it's not death, it can be sorted. That'd be the message I'd have. So, and this too will pass. In grief with passing time, it improves. COVID will pass. So that's a lot of my mantra. This too will pass. And
how much did dancing help you in that, knowing that you could go back, that you had something that was there all the time that you could go to? That did you feel that being able to go back into classes or going back teaching or?
It was huge. The day I went out to Corofin, that I think that was the first day I drove the car actually, and it was months. I don't actually know the time frame, but it was a couple of months later. Certainly, I would think, I don't know. I actually have no idea of time. I know Angela phoned me and said, you know, come out to the class. I will go in. I couldn't drive at the time. Just things that you could normally do. She said, I'll come in and I'll pick you up and come out to the class. And I thought, oh God, no, I can't go next Monday, leave it. So finally, when I said, you know what, I'll go this evening. I will go out to the class. And I had to pull over on the road several times on the way out because I was crying. I was like, what am I doing? This doesn't matter. A dancing class doesn't matter. Nothing mattered in life. So it's like, what am I doing? And I put on my glasses. You know, I don't wear the glasses that often, but I put on the glasses going into the class because I thought my eyes now are going to be all red and I feel stupid and I look stupid and no one will know what I'll say. And funny enough, Derek's son Tiernan saw me walking and he just shouted, oh, hey, Chris, you're back. I didn't know you wore glasses. And it was
just as if nothing
happened. And then you get inside your head. The other thing that happened was Sean Kilkenny actually had me, he contacted me at Christmas and he said,
sweetheart.
Absolutely. And Sean said, you're coming over to judge my feis in March. And I was, no. Couldn't possibly do it, Sean. Couldn't possibly do that. I wouldn't remember a number. I just, I'm barely able to get out of bed. And that was from the August to the March. And he said, don't worry, I have your back. I'll have a plan B. And I remember saying to him, what was your plan B? He said, there never was a plan B. But I had to get on a plane on my own. And I didn't have the security of this bubble around me. And I remember that was the first day that I got through a day where I did not think of Kenneth. And I went into the loo at one stage and I thought, I've been sitting there for about 4 hours and I've not thought of Kenneth, because you got so sucked into the competition and watching the dancing. And that gave me great hope. I felt guilty as well, but that if you can find whatever it is that brings joy to you, that
even temporarily,
dancing is great for that. It's sure, we're all crazy, Mary. We go to a fest and we're all so absorbed in it. There's no other world. And there's a beauty in that,